The landing ramps crash down into surf, already stained dark. Machine gun fire rips across the beach as men sprint forward, some falling before they reach the sand. Radios scream over one another. Smoke swallows the shoreline. Somewhere offshore, a commander stares at a map and realizes this is only the first hour, and the casualty estimates were wrong. Every ridge is fortified. Every village hides defenders. Civilians are moving with the troops, not fleeing from them. This isn't a battle meant to be won quickly. This is a war designed to bleed an invader dry. In Washington, planners are counting bodies before they exist. In Tokyo, leaders are preparing the population for death rather than surrender. What you're watching never happened, but every order was written, every landing beach chosen, every grave anticipated. This was Operation Downfall. By the summer of 1945, the Second World War in Europe was over, but the Pacific War had entered its most dangerous phase. Japan had lost its navy, its air force was depleted, and its cities were being burned from the sky. Yet the Japanese government showed no signs of surrender. For American planners, the question was no longer whether Japan would be defeated, but how many would die before it happened. The answer they prepared for was called Operation Downfall. It was not a single invasion, but the largest amphibious assault plan ever devised, dwarfing Normandy in scale and brutality. Downfall was divided into two colossal operations: Olympic, the invasion of Kyushu in November 1945, and Coronet, the invasion of the Tokyo Plain in early 1946. Together, they represented the final catastrophic gamble of the Pacific War. The assumptions behind Downfall were shaped by recent experience. At Iwo Jima, nearly 7,000 Americans had been killed fighting a garrison of just over 20,000 Japanese defenders. At Okinawa, more than 12,000 Americans died, alongside at least 100,000 Japanese soldiers and tens of thousands of civilians. These battles revealed a grim truth. Japan was no longer fighting to win. It was fighting to make victory unbearable. American intelligence understood this. Intercepted communications and battlefield reports showed that Japanese doctrine had shifted toward total resistance. Surrender was not an option. Defensive positions were built deep underground. Units were ordered to fight until annihilated. Civilians were mobilized into militias, armed with obsolete rifles, grenades, and even bamboo spears. The goal was not to repel invasion, but to inflict such horrific casualties that the United States might negotiate. Operation Olympic targeted Kyushu because its southern airfields could support fighter cover for later operations. But this also made Kyushu the most heavily defended target imaginable. Japanese planners correctly identified the landing beaches months in advance. By August 1945, they had moved hundreds of thousands of troops into the region, constructing bunkers, artillery nests, and cave systems overlooking the coastlines. Aircraft were dispersed and hidden, reserved for suicide attacks rather than air superiority. Kamikaze warfare was central to Japan's strategy. During Okinawa, suicide pilots had sunk or damaged dozens of Allied ships. For Downfall, Japan stockpiled thousands of aircraft, many obsolete, barely airworthy, specifically for one-way missions. Pilots received minimal training. Their targets were troop transports, hospital ships, and supply vessels. The objective was to collapse the invasion before it could fully land. American planners tried to calculate the cost. Early estimates suggested 250,000 casualties. Later projections climbed far higher. Some internal documents warned of 1 million American casualties, with hundreds of thousands killed. These were not alarmist figures. They were based on observed casualty ratios from previous battles, multiplied by the scale of Downfall. Logistically, the invasion would stretch the U.S. military to its limits. Millions of tons of supplies would have to be landed under fire. Medical services prepared for unprecedented trauma. Entire new cemeteries were planned. The U.S. government quietly ordered hundreds of thousands of Purple Heart medals in anticipation of the wounded. Those same medals are still awarded today. On the Japanese side, preparations were even desperate. The government initiated Ketsu-go, the National Defense Plan. It placed the entire population on a war footing. School children trained with wooden weapons. Women were organized into auxiliary combat units. Propaganda emphasized honorable death over surrender. Even as cities burned, the leadership believed national survival depended on making invasion catastrophic enough to force compromise. Politically, the situation was fractured. Within Japan's leadership, factions argued over whether surrender was acceptable at all. Some sought mediation through the Soviet Union. Others believed fighting to the end would preserve the imperial system. Time was running out, but no consensus existed. For the United States, there was another factor: the Soviet Union. In August 1945, Soviet forces invaded Japanese-occupied Manchuria, crushing the Kwantung Army in days. This altered the strategic balance. A prolonged invasion risked Soviet involvement in Japan itself, potentially dividing the country after the war. Speed mattered. It was within this context that a new weapon entered the equation. The atomic bomb was not initially conceived as an alternative to invasion, but as a supplement, another means of forcing surrender before downfall became unavoidable. The bombing of Hiroshima shocked the world. The bombing of Nagasaki followed. Yet even then, surrender was not immediate. Only after the combination of atomic devastation, Soviet entry into the war, and internal collapse did the Japanese government finally intervene. The emperor broke precedent and ordered surrender. Operation Downfall was cancelled before a single landing craft launched. What never happened still shaped the world. Entire military doctrines were rewritten based on Downfall's assumptions. Nuclear weapons became central to deterrence precisely because leaders understood what conventional invasion would have required. The human cost that was avoided is impossible to measure, but the preparations reveal how close it came. Operation Downfall stands as a reminder that wars do not end cleanly. They grind toward conclusions shaped by fear, calculation, and the willingness to sacrifice lives on an imaginable scale. The beaches of Kyushu remain quiet today, but the plans drawn for them tell a story of how the most destructive invasion in history was prepared in full and then stopped at the last possible moment.